Boldwood presents The Silver Ladies Seize the Day, written by Judy Leigh and read by Phillida Nash. Some of us think holding on makes us strong, but sometimes it's letting go. Hermann Hesse. Prologue. Summer 1955, Surrey. Cecily glanced in the mirror, swished her skirt, and thought she looked a bit like Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. She showed her reflection a seductive pout, and a moment's panic seized her. She hoped she didn't look too brassy, but then again she had no intention of being mousy. She wanted to be respectable yet pretty at the same time. Yes, she was certainly pretty. And things were changing. It wasn't the 40s anymore. A young woman had opportunities nowadays. In her head, her mother's voice whined, "You look like a tart. That red lipstick is common. Those heels are too high." It was only her imagination. She had no reason to assume her mother would disapprove, except that she hadn't loved her enough to stay. Cecily didn't remember the woman who had left when she was 3 years old, and her grandmother said little about it except that Lillian, that was her mother's name, was no better than she should be. Cecily had been born out of wedlock. Her mother had run off with the next man who'd shown an interest. The neighbours all agreed it had been shameful, and Cecily thought it was embarrassing. She certainly didn't intend to go that way. She believed every word her grandmother told her, that her mother was not a bad person, but she'd always been easily influenced and impressionable. Emily Hamilton had brought Cecily up to be a strong, sensible girl who took pride in herself. She should wait until she was married before having relations. Her grandmother was the only one whose opinion Cecily really cared about. As she hurried downstairs, heels clacking, she heard the wireless rattle from the living room, the BBC Home Service. As Cecily breezed in, her grandmother looked up from the armchair where she was sewing, glasses perched on the end of her nose. She murmured, "Don't be too late back, love." "I won't, Nan." "Are you going out with Joyce?" "Yes, we're off to the Orchid." Cecily patted her blonde curls. She still couldn't get used to how bright and bouncy the new hairstyle was. "Have a good time," Emily said, smiling, briefly scanning her granddaughter's flouncy clothes. Emily always worried when Cecily went out dancing, uneasy about the attention of all those men with only one thing on their minds. Instead, she said, "Joyce thinks of little else but boys." "I know, but she's my best friend," Cecily said loyally. "You're not empty-headed like your mother, dear." Emily took a deep breath. "You're meant for more than standing at the kitchen sink washing nappies. We all are." Cecily knew what she meant. "I won't stay out late. I'll only drink lemonade. And Joyce and I dance with different boys all the time, never just one. But dancing's so much fun." "Having a boyfriend at 22 is all right, Cecily, but remember—" Emily Hamilton tugged the thread through her needle and tied a knot at one end. "You don't want to get serious yet. There's plenty of time for steady relationships. You have your future to think of." "I know that, Nan." "You're sensible." Cecily's grandmother gave the same gentle smile she had before and returned to the dress she was mending. "Tomorrow morning we'll go into town and do some shopping. We'll stop for a nice cuppa when we've finished, shall we?" "I'll buy you a peach melba in the ice cream bar. My treat." Cecily rushed over and hugged her Nan, feeling the scratchy silver hair against her cheek. Her grandmother was all skin and bone in her arms. "Enjoy the dancing," Emily said. But she didn't look up until Cecily had left the room. Her sigh was the last thing Cecily heard before she rushed outside into the last warmth of the Surrey summer. Joyce was waiting for her at the corner, wearing an Audrey Hepburn-style cocktail dress with a swirling skirt and red high heels. Her newly blonde hair was in a high ponytail with a sweeping fringe over one eye. She waved excitedly as she saw Cecily. "Come on, we've missed the first bus already." "I love the dress, Joyce," Cecily said as she caught up with her. "Is it new?" "Yes. Do you think it shows off my curves?" Joyce swished her petticoat. "I hope we meet some dreamy boys tonight." "I just want to dance and dance," Cecily grinned. "I've been learning a few songs on the guitar. I can play Smile by Nat King Cole, and I can sing it too." "Oh, I'd love to smooch to that song." Joyce glanced down the road. "Here's the bus." A few moments later, the number 72 shuddered to a halt. There were a few passengers already seated, mainly single travellers, women clutching bags of shopping, a man smoking a cigarette. The girls squeezed past the conductor, hurrying towards the back seat, flopping down as the bus jolted forward and joined the evening traffic. Joyce delved in her handbag and pulled out a quarter-pound bag of Bluebird chocolate toffees, offering them to Cecily. Cecily unwrapped one and pushed the sweet into her mouth, biting into the chocolate, tasting the hard caramel beneath. Joyce grinned. "It pays to work on the sweet counter at Woolies." She pushed an arm through Cecily's. "Mum says come over for your tea next week. What about Tuesday? We can have ham. Tuesday's my evening class. And Thursday." Cecily glanced through the grimy window as the bus turned a corner. "I can come on Wednesday." "Wednesday it is," Joyce agreed. "I forgot you did evening classes. You're still determined to be a school teacher?" "It beats the typing pool. I've got my place to start in September. I love kids." Cecily finished chewing. "The little ones especially." "So do I." Joyce rolled her eyes in a mock swoon. "I've always had my heart set on 2 kiddies, one of each, and a dreamboat husband who adores me. We live in those new houses in Worplesdon. I'd be made for life." "Don't you want something for yourself? A career?" Cecily asked. But she knew the answer. "I want to be a wife and a mum, have a home of my own," Joyce said. "Mum says you're too independent because you never had a proper mother to bring you up." "Don't we all want to be independent?" Cecily thought about her mother, who hadn't wanted her, who had left her as a child and never sent word again. Perhaps Joyce's mother had a point. "Not me, a ring on my finger, someone to make a fuss over." Joyce winked. The conductor was hovering nearby, so she dropped a shilling into his palm. 2 sixpennies into town, please." The conductor pushed back his cap and patted thin grey hair as he looked the 2 girls over, taking in their bright dresses, nylon stockings, high heels. He coughed awkwardly and turned a handle to print off 2 tickets from the roll in his machine. "Here you are." The bus rattled onwards, around a corner, down a long street. Cecily stood up. "Thanks, this is our stop." Joyce was on her feet, rushing towards the door. "Off dancing at the Orchid, eh?" The conductor grumbled his disapproval. "You want to watch yourselves, dressed like that." "Watch ourselves?" Joyce retorted. "Oh, no, we leave that to dirty old men like you, Daddy-o." Cecily grabbed her arm as they hurried off the bus and whispered, "Daddy-o?" They burst out laughing. The Orchid Ballroom might have been a grand place in Victorian times, but the decor was tired and worn now. The place had seen better days. The glittering chandelier still hung from the domed ceiling, a centrepiece among a swirl of red lights. The floor was already crowded with dancers. Beyond was a well-lit bar, people drinking, seated around clusters of tables. Music boomed, Bill Haley and his Comets. Couples were swinging and jiving. The women's skirts swung out like bells. Some of the men wore smart suits, others were dressed more casually. One man danced athletically, lifting his partner, a cigarette clamped between his lips. Joyce said excitedly, "Shall we get a drink?" "We might have one later," Cecily suggested. "Come on, let's go to the bar." Joyce grabbed her hand. "I'll buy you a lemonade." "All right." Cecily followed Joyce through the juddering crowd. Joyce leaned against the bar and waved furiously at the barman. "Can I have 2 lemonades?" The barman was busy. He ignored Joyce and turned to 2 men who had just arrived, who stood quietly behind them. Cecily noticed that they were smartly dressed in suits and ties. One was dark-haired, handsome in the style of heartthrob James Dean. The other man was slimmer, his fair hair too neat. He seemed hesitant in the shadow of the first man. The good-looking one paused and indicated Joyce and Cecily. "I think these young ladies were here first." "They were," his companion agreed. The barman seemed unconcerned. He half turned to Joyce. "Right, darling, what did you want?" Before she could speak, the dark-haired man said, "What can I get you girls?" Joyce gave a squeal of delight. "Oh, I'll have a snowball if you're buying." The man turned to Cecily. "The same for you?" "No, thanks." Cecily was thoughtful. "Just a lemonade." "Oh, try a snowball, Cecily, or a gin and orange," Joyce said. "Have whatever you like." The man looked into Cecily's eyes. His were dark brown, honest, kind. Cecily felt her heart bump in a new way as she said, "Just lemonade, please." 2 shandies, a lemonade and a snowball, the James Dean look-alike said. The other man, the shyer one, said, "I'm Albert and this is Eddie. We're brothers." "Are you sisters?" "No." Joyce turned from Albert to Eddie. "I'm Joyce. Cecily's my best friend." "Oh, I just thought, you both being blondes," Albert said awkwardly. "Here you are." Eddie passed Cecily a fizzing lemonade. He gave Joyce a glass of frothy yellow liquid with a cherry on top. "Cheers." "Cheers," Joyce gushed, showing her widest smile. "Shall we sit down?" Eddie glanced towards an empty table for 4 in the corner. He put an arm around Cecily's shoulders, shepherding her through the twirling dancers. Joyce was just behind, her eyes on Eddie. Albert followed a little way back, clutching his shandy, as if he was worried he'd spill it. They sat down. "So, Cecily," Eddie leaned forward, "are you from this area?" Cecily nodded, the glass to her lips, and Joyce said, "We both live 10 minutes out of town. We came here on the bus." "We're from Jacob's Well," Albert explained. "We drove here. Eddie has a car." "Oh," Joyce gave Eddie all her attention. "What sort have you got?" "A Morris Minor," Eddie said, smiling at Cecily. "What colour?" "Green." Eddie's eyes were still on Cecily. "Eddie's a mechanic," Albert explained. "I work in a warehouse." "A mechanic's a great job." Joyce leaned forward and sipped her snowball alluringly. "I think mechanics look so nice in overalls." "The place I work in smells of metal and dust," Eddie told Cecily. "It's not very romantic. But one day I'll have my own garage." "Eddie's ambitious," Albert explained, his face proud. "So's Cecily. She's going to be a teacher." Joyce gulped the last of her snowball and turned her attention to Albert. "I want to dance." "Oh." Albert stood up nervously. "Shall I dance with you?" Joyce grabbed his hand. "I love Bill Haley and his comets," she said as she dragged him into the crowd. Eddie's eyes were still on Cecily. "A teacher, eh?" Cecily realized she'd hardly spoken yet. She was watching the light in his eyes, the way his lips moved. She said, "I'm doing evening classes to get all the qualifications. I've been offered a place for September to train to be a primary teacher." She wondered if she came across as dull, but Eddie's eyes gleamed. "You've got things worked out." "I want to do something I love." "So do I." Eddie took a deep breath. "It's so important to follow your heart. Too many people just put up with second best. But we have one chance to grab life." "We do." Cecily was thoughtful. "My mum abandoned me when I was a child, and I never knew my father. My nan brought me up, and she always said that I should make the best of myself. She was a suffragette years ago." "Her character's rubbed off on you, I can see that." Eddie reached out and placed his hand over hers. "You seem so self-assured, unafraid of anything." "I know what I want in life," Cecily said. "Me too." Eddie seemed delighted. He glanced briefly across the dance floor. "Oh, do you want to dance? Albert and your friend seem to be enjoying themselves." "I love dancing," Cecily said. Looking at Eddie's earnest face, his deep-set eyes, his warm grin. "But I think I'd like to talk a bit longer." "I was hoping you'd say that," Eddie said. He reached for his shandy. He'd hardly touched it. Cecily realized her lemonade glass was almost full. Eddie said, "So, tell me about yourself, Cecily. I want to know all about you." He couldn't draw his eyes away, and Cecily was still staring at his face. For a moment, time seemed to take a breath and hold it. Cecily said mischievously, "What do you want to know? I have to be home by 10:30. "But I'm hoping we can get to know each other," Eddie said quickly. "Tomorrow's Saturday. I can drive us to Winkworth. We can have a picnic." "With Joyce and Albert?" Cecily asked. She felt the pressure of Eddie's hand on hers. "If you want your friend there, of course she can come. But I'd really like to be with you." At 10:25, the night sky spattered with stars, Eddie stopped the car on the corner so that Albert could walk Joyce home. His arm was tentatively around her waist, but she was already being familiar, calling him Albie, clinging to him. Eddie drove the few yards to Cecily's house, and as the green Morris idled, he said, "Can I walk you to your door?" Cecily's breath caught in her throat. He meant that he wanted to kiss her. Her mind raced to memories of the other boyfriends she'd had. Georgie, Martin, Tommy, all nice young men she'd been friends with first, who'd all invested in her far too much, and she'd unintentionally broken their hearts, one after the other. Kissing them had happened in a spontaneous moment of affection and warmth. But with Eddie, it felt strangely different. She said, "I can't stay out long. My nan worries." "Of course," Eddie understood at once. "When I pick you up tomorrow, I'll meet her first, so that she knows I'm—" Cecily finished his sentence in her mind. Respectable? Serious? Eddie wriggled from the car, opened Cecily's door and offered a hand. When she clambered out, he didn't let go. His fingers entwined around hers, and her hand felt safe, protected. It gave her a glowing feeling. They walked to the back door, and Cecily reached in her handbag for a key. She said, "I should go in." "Yes." Eddie was staring at her, but neither of them moved. Cecily's gaze tangled in his. She couldn't pull away. Her heart was thudding as he pulled her close and his lips met hers. He kissed her, tugging her against him, and straight away she was whisked into a torrent of emotions she had no name for. Attraction? Love? Desire? She pulled back, catching her breath. Cecily had never felt such an explosion of feelings. Eddie must have felt the same thing, like electricity. "I'm sorry," Eddie said quickly. "I didn't mean to—" "No, it's all right." Cecily was astonished at her own words. All right? The sensation of kissing Eddie was shocking, terrifying, but it was the most incredible feeling in the world. They stared at each other again, and Cecily said, "I ought to go in." "Can I see you tomorrow?" "Yes." "At 12? All right. I'll meet your grandmother first." "Good. Then we'll drive somewhere." "Eddie," Cecily reached for his hand. He brought it to his lips in a sudden movement and said, "You know you can trust me, Cecily. Since we met tonight, You?" Cecily waited, holding her breath. "I've never met a girl quite like you. It feels special." "It does." Cecily held on to the moment a little longer, enjoying the way her skin tingled. She tugged her hand away. "Good night, Eddie." "Good night, Cecily." She heard his whisper as she closed the door behind her. For a moment she stood still, her mind whirling. What had just happened? She was 22 years old, her life stretching before her, and until this evening everything had been ordered, predictable and stable. Now she had met Eddie Blake. It was as if still waters had been stirred up. More than stirred. It was as if she were buffeted by strong waves, powerless, lifted on a tempest of emotions. She was feverish, impulsive. She couldn't wait to see Eddie tomorrow. In one evening, everything had changed. She would never be the same again. Cecily took another breath and realized the word she was looking for. Love. That was it. She was falling in love. Chapter 1. The Present Day. "Penny for them, Cecily." Cecily's hand shook as she held the china cup and brought it to her lips. Her hands always seemed to shake nowadays. She had heard Lynn speak, but she'd been deep in thought. "Pardon?" "I said penny for your thoughts." Lynn gave a light laugh. "You were somewhere else." "Was I?" Cecily turned to where Lynn, Josie and Minnie were watching from the sofa. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was thinking about—" She wondered how to explain how I got to being so old. It's almost my 92nd birthday. She couldn't believe how time had flown. 1 minute I was 22. We were quite young for our age then, but I was so hopeful for the future. I trained and started teaching, then came to Middleton Ferris, and I met you all. "It was 1959, Minnie said. "We were desperate not to get terrible Thomas for our teacher. Then you came into our lives, Cecily. You came in and introduced yourself. You said, 'My name is Miss Hamilton. I'm your teacher for this year.' We couldn't believe our luck," Josie said. "I remember exactly what you had on. You were wearing a fitted blue dress with a swirling skirt and blue shoes with pointed toes." "And you had scarlet fingernails," Lynn closed her eyes, remembering, "and a guitar. We were all in awe. And we sang 'Wake Up Little Susie' and 'Peggy Sue' and 'Jailhouse Rock.' You were so cool." You read The Wind in the Willows to us while we snuggled against the big hot radiators. It was heaven, Minnie added. By 3:30, the whole class was in love with you. Oh, I remember it all. Cecily sipped her tea again. The milkiness of it comforted her. I loved teaching, and you were my girls, my successes. Minnie, you went on to lecture classics in Oxford. Josie, Lynn, you stayed in the village and built your lives there, and I had the career I dreamed of. You don't regret it? Josie asked, pushing back dark hair. I mean, you dedicated your whole life to your pupils. If you mean, do I regret being a spinster, I can tell you it's perfectly all right, Cecily said firmly. Absolutely, Minnie gave a low laugh. I've always enjoyed the independence of life in Oxford, and the whole bed to myself as and when I want it. Lynn was about to say that she was happily married, that she wouldn't be without her beloved Neil, but she stopped herself. Josie was examining her fingers thoughtfully, and Lynn knew who she was thinking of. I had a wonderful marriage with Harry. Josie took a shaky breath. But you're right. We all have to make choices. Oh, by the way, she turned to Minnie, hunched in a long dress and Doc Marten boots. Have you heard from that American man who's besotted with you? Jensen? He calls me, yes. Minnie seemed to want to close the conversation down. I took Tina to see the doctor yesterday. She's making great progress. I think she'll be coming back here soon. She pushed a hand through grey curls. I'm looking forward to having my own space. It's kind of you to look after Tina after the stroke, Lynn said. Yes, but it's summertime, and summer in Oxford means parties and fun. I could do with my independence back. Minnie thought about her words. I love Tina deeply, and I'm glad to help, but we're chalk and cheese. I'm sure she'll be ready to come home soon, Josie said. I wish you would be quick about it. Minnie grinned mischievously. You were always very different, Cecily observed. Not that she didn't have your brains, Minnie, but she didn't have your drive. She had drive, all right, but my dad held her back. He told her that one of us going to the snooty grammar school was enough. Girls have so much more opportunity now. Cecily stared into the distance. I'm just happy to be at home and make the man I love an edible dinner. Lynn smoothed her blonde hair. I can incinerate a ping meal in 7 minutes from frozen. What are you cooking, Neil, tonight? Josie asked. He's making gnocchi, I think. I ought to get off to the station. Minnie glanced at the clock. My train's at 2:30, and Tina's at the physio. She turned to her friends. It's great to catch up, though. I love our lunches. Thanks for hosting, Cecily. It was lovely. Josie smiled. So, we'll meet at Lynn's next time? Or O'Deal's, Lynn said quickly, unless Neil bakes his lemon drizzle cake, in which case you can all come to mine. I better be off. Minnie stood up and moved towards her friends, arms already thrown wide. Lynn and Josie joined her in a hug. Cecily was sitting down, staring at her cup. Are you sure you're all right, Cecily? Josie asked, a little anxious. What? Oh, I'm fine. Cecily brought her cup to her lips again. The tea had almost all gone. It just seems strange that all those years ago I was your teacher, and now here we are, so much older. We're best friends, though, Lynn said happily. Do you think about the old times a lot, Cecily? Minnie asked, perceptive as ever. Sometimes, Cecily said. The image of Eddie's face still lingered in her thoughts, his serious dark eyes. the way his fingers linked easily through hers, as if they fitted perfectly. I try to live in the present. She brightened, changing the subject. In fact, I'm a modern girl now. I'm on Facebook. I'm not, Minnie said abruptly. There are too many people I want to avoid. All your exes who are still in love with you, Lynn reminded her. No, I love Facebook. I keep up with my grandchildren. Melissa's always sending me photos, selfies mainly, and Louis is football mad. He plays in goal. So, what are you doing on Facebook, Cecily? Josie asked. You know Jack Lovejoy, who I played guitar with last year at the fete, your neighbour's son, Lynn, Cecily began. Lynn remembered. He's gone off on tour with granddaughter, his folk group. Janice told me they're playing up north somewhere. Manchester tomorrow night, Cecily said. Jack said he wanted to friend me on Facebook so that he could send me clips of his gigs. He thinks the world of you. We all do. Minnie reached for her bag. I better go or I'll miss the train. She pecked Cecily's cheek. We'll catch up soon. We certainly will. Cecily put her cup down and eased herself up for another hug. I look forward to our time together. What about lunch round my house tomorrow, Cecily? Josie offered. It'll save one of us cooking. Come over on your little scooter. Let's meet at the Sun, Cecily said. It's fairly quiet on a Friday. Can you come, Lynn? Hairdressers, sorry, Lynn said apologetically, although I'd rather sit in the pub any day than listen to Mandy go on about her boyfriend's ingrown toenails. It'll be just me and you, Josie, Cecily said. I'll come down on the Flying Plum. I call it that because it's purple and I drive it too fast. She held out her arms for one final hug. It's been so nice. Oh, we haven't washed up. I can do that before we go, Lynn offered. Not at all, I'll do that, Cecily insisted. Then I'll have a little nap. I'm quite fond of my afternoon naps. Her eyes misted over and she became quiet. Josie glanced at Minnie and Lynn. Well, we'll be off. See you soon. Cecily muttered something to herself, and Minnie led the way to the door. The friends linked arms as they walked along Tadderley Road towards the station, just as they had years ago in primary school. They were quiet, lost in thought for a while, Minnie said. Our Miss Hamilton was a bit low this afternoon. Do you think she's all right? Lynn looked worried, Minnie said. She's tremendous for nearly 92. I only hope I'm so sprightly when I'm her age. Lynn raised an eyebrow. I'm not as perky as she is, she groaned. The arthritis meds I'm on are better than the last ones, but there are days when I have no energy. Me too, Josie agreed. But in my case, it's called loneliness. Oh, Josie, Lynn said sadly. I'm sorry. Josie met her eyes. Being a widow's hard. Even the good times are a bit empty. I can't imagine what you've been through. Lynn's heart went out to her friend. Josie forced a smile. Having you two and Cecily helps. It'll be nice meeting her tomorrow. I wish I could be there, Lynn said sadly. Me too, Minnie agreed. It's great to catch up. You've done the best of all of us, Minnie. Your life in Oxford, being an academic. Retired academic. Minnie pulled a face. I still get invited to the odd conference, a bit of research here and there, but in all honesty, my days of working with the finest minds in the world are over. In short, she laughed, I'm defunct. But we're still useful, Lynn protested as they turned into Nobb's End, the newest estate in the village. Useful? We're more than that. We're special, Josie argued. Does Cecily seem depressed? Did you think so? Minnie wondered. I did. She looked sad, Lynn said. Maybe we should cheer her up. Josie was thoughtful. What could we do? Let's think about it and text each other, Minnie suggested. Definitely. Oh, Lynn paused and pointed to a sign in a garden. Look! The house has been sold. Darryl and Charlotte Featherstone's? It's been on the market for months. Josie frowned. Darryl was such a cheat, such an unpleasant man. He got what he deserved, Minnie muttered. Charlotte's working in London now. I bet she's much happier without him. I heard he's living with a nurse in Tadderley, poor woman. After what Darryl did to that poor girl, Lynn sniffed. I wonder who's moving in. Someone with money. These houses have all the mod cons, Josie said. It'll be nice to see new faces in the village. No time to linger. Minnie leaned forward, tugging her friends towards the railway station. My train's due in 10 minutes. We'll wait till it comes. Lynn surged forward. Why don't you and I go to O'Deal's for a cuppa on the way back, Lynn? Josie said. We can come up with something to cheer Cecily up and text you on the train, Minnie. Maybe we should ask her what's the matter, Minnie said, ever practical. I'm not sure, Lynn wavered. She might not want to say. Oh, you don't think she's unwell? I hope not. Oh, what about, Josie exclaimed, she has a birthday soon, 2nd of August. Let's throw her a party. That's a great idea. We have plenty of time to plan it, Minnie agreed. A summer party. Just what she needs. We all do, Lynn said, pulling an exaggeratedly sad face. None of us is getting any younger. Cecily shivered, although it wasn't cold. She tucked up in her bed for an afternoon nap. But she was still wide awake, an old photograph album on her knee. She turned the pages carefully and saw herself in a creased, grainy picture as a gawky schoolgirl, standing close to her lovely grandmother. She owed Emily Hamilton so much. There was an old black and white snap of her with Joyce Perkins, her best friend. They were arm in arm, grinning. Joyce had modelled herself on Lauren Bacall, but her face held a kind of desperation, a need to be loved. Cecily wondered where Joyce might be now. She recalled her friend's dream of having an adoring husband and 2 perfect children. Cecily knew she had one child, Elizabeth Cecily. She wondered if Joyce was still married, if she was still alive. With a heavy heart she looked at the next page, and there he was, Eddie Blake, staring boldly at the camera. Her heart still skipped a beat when she saw the roguish James Dean twisted grin that made a dimple in one cheek. His hair was thick, brushed back, and his dark eyes glimmered beneath strong brows. It was a rugged face, Cecily thought. He was handsome. There was another photograph below, of Cecily and Eddie together. Eddie in a jacket and casual trousers, his arm draped around her shoulders, as if she belonged to him. Cecily frowned. In the picture, she was gazing up at him adoringly. It was just after they became engaged. There it was, in a click, the man she'd loved beyond words, the one who made a big mistake that changed her life forever. The one who broke her heart. Time had passed. Eddie was probably dead now, and Cecily thought, here she was after all these years. still in love with him. She put a hand to her cheek and wiped away the single tear, snuggling down beneath the covers, closing her eyes. Yes, at 91 years of age, she was sleeping alone, as she'd done every day of her life. It wasn't fair. Chapter 2. Lynn and Josie were sitting in the cafe inspecting Adele's shiny menu. "She's got new teas," Lynn said. "Look, blackcurrant, raspberry, hibiscus. And new dishes, too. That's just so Adele. Reggae nachos and Trinidadian fish stew. It makes me feel hungry even though we just ate. Oh, Josie, look." Lynn leaned forward. "Soursop ice cream." "What's a soursop, do you think?" "I've no idea. Odele's really jazzing things up." Josie looked around. The cafe was almost empty, apart from dangerous Dave Dawson, who was chomping his way through egg and chips. He glanced over. "All right, Josie, Lynn," he grinned. "I had a late start again this morning." Josie knew why. "Elsie?" "It's always Elsie," Dave said. "Florence and Adam get up to feed her several times a night. It wakes me up and I can't get back off until 7. Then I sleep like a log. I got up at 9 this morning. I had an MOT to do on a Galaxy and I kept the customer waiting. She wasn't very pleased." He made a face. "It's a hard life being a granddad." "You'll be glad when Florence and Adam find a place of their own," Lynn said. "They were going to buy a flat in Tadderney. It fell through." Dave's mouth was full of egg. "To be honest, I'd miss them if they left. It'd be weird all on my own. Florence is a princess. She makes all my meals, and Adam's a good lad. No, I don't mind the baby crying, to be honest." He picked up a slice of bread and wiped the egg yolk across the plate. "I can't grumble." "What are you grumbling about now, Dad?" Florence said as she breezed in from the kitchen, her long hair tied back in a ponytail. She paused at Lynn and Josie's table. "What can I get you?" "Tea," Josie said gratefully. "Earl Grey, please." "I'll try a blackberry tea." Lynn looked at the menu. "And could Josie and I share a soursop ice cream? Just to see what it's like?" "Of course." Florence tugged a notepad from her apron pocket. "Odele's out back at the moment, perfecting a coconut ginger slice. You'll like the soursop." "Florence brought some home the other night." Dave's plate was clean. "It's a fruit pulp with cream and condensed milk. Lovely it was." "And how's little Elsie?" Lynn glanced at Florence for signs of sleepless nights. She looked tired. "Oh, we're fine. Can you believe Elsie's 9 months old already? She's trying to crawl." "How are you finding being a working mum?" Josie asked. "Are you working every day?" "I am," Florence said. "I miss Elsie. Geraldine looks after her. She's just the best childminder, and she only lives across the road." "Right. Tea and ice cream coming up," Florence said, as she hurried through the colourful plastic strips that led to the kitchen. Dangerous Dave called after her. "I might try one of those coconut thingies if Odele wants an opinion." "Coming up, Dad." Florence's voice drifted on the air. "There have to be some perks to being a granddad," Dave grinned. "Besides, that Galaxy job's going to take me all afternoon. The exhaust has a leak and the back box is gone. The owner asked me to fix it." He glanced towards Lynn and Josie and made a mischievous face. "So I need a decent lunch down me first." Minnie arrived, at her 4-bedroom bay-fronted Victorian mid-terrace in Newton Road, pushed the key into the lock and stepped inside. It was far too big for one person, but she'd bought it 40 years ago as a young lecturer at St Hilda's, with the intention of filling it with friends, parties, and good times. And so many books. It had been the perfect base for her, and it still was. It was her place of solitude, to read, to think, to be alone. But, of course, she wasn't alone now. "Minnie, is that you?" Tina's voice drifted from the living room. "I got a lift back with someone from physio. You wouldn't put the kettle on, would you?" Minnie charged in and stopped dead. Tina was wearing a tracksuit, her feet in soiled trainers, up on the sofa. She was reading a comic she'd picked up from somewhere. It certainly wasn't Minnie's. The radio was blaring 80s pop music. Cushions were scattered on the floor. There was an open packet of hobnobs on the sofa arm. Minnie wasn't a fan of hobnobs, or 80s pop. The carpet was covered with biscuit crumbs. Tina said, "Kimberly at physio said I'm improving. I've got another appointment soon." Minnie examined her sister. Tina, a few years younger, looked the picture of health. Over the months since her stroke, she had made a good recovery. Her speech and her mobility were almost fully back. She had a slight limp when she was tired. And she'd put on weight. Minnie was only too aware that she sat around all day watching TV, eating biscuits. "You're looking well, Tina." Minnie believed in being direct. "Did they say you were ready to go home?" "Kimberly just said I was making progress." "So you could go back to your place soon. Do you think you'd be up to a bit of light work on your allotment?" "It's June," Tina shook her head. "I should have started earlier if I was going to plant vegetables." "You could plant sprouts and cabbages for the winter." "I let someone else take my allotment on. Kimberly said I could have a second stroke if I go home too soon." Tina leaned on her elbow, pushing another hobnob into her mouth. "Right." Minnie put her hands on her hips. "Cup of tea, wasn't it?" She didn't want to upset Tina. She filled the kettle full of water and shouted over the sound of it heating up. "We had a nice lunch at Cecily's." "How is the old dear?" Tina called, her mouth full of another biscuit. Minnie's frown deepened. "There's no need to be disrespectful. Cecily gets about a darn sight more than you do." Minnie stopped herself. She'd overstepped the mark and been insensitive. Even sisters who were like chalk and cheese should be civil. "She's 92 soon. A birthday party might be nice." "In Middleton Ferris?" Tina asked. "Of course," Minnie retorted. Tina wasn't really interested. "Nice." Minnie poured hot water, added milk. Tina's voice came again. "A postcard came from New York." Oh, Minnie knew who it was from, and that Tina would have read it. "And what did Jensen say?" "He's working on some play or other, and he misses you." "No change then," Minnie said, picking up 2 mugs. She paused, and the image of Jensen came into her mind, his cloud of hair, his inquisitive eyes behind spectacles. She missed him too, but she couldn't coordinate her sister's care and throw herself into the biggest romance of her life with a New York theatre director who lived across the pond at the same time. She had to admit it had been a sacrifice. When Tina went home, they'd get together. Minnie was sure Tina was almost well enough. She plastered a smile on her face and waltzed into the lounge. The packet of hobnobs was almost empty. She said, "Waitress service," and plonked the mug in Tina's hand. Tina adjusted her position on the sofa and went back to reading her comic. "Right," So, Minnie said firmly, let's have an honest and frank conversation. Tell me exactly what Kimberly said about your recovery. Then we can plan for the future. Florence opened her eyes to an ear-splitting yell. Adam's head was on the pillow next to hers. He lifted it groggily. Shall I go? No. Florence eased herself upright and blinked towards the alarm clock. It's 7:30 anyway. We should be getting up. I'll feed her. I'll make breakfast. Adam didn't move. I'll give Dave a shout too. He was late yesterday. Florence was already struggling into a dressing gown on her way to the sunshine yellow nursery that Dave had painted last year. He'd fallen from the ladder and sprained his thumb. Dangerous Dave always had accidents, she thought with a smile. She picked Elsie up. The baby immediately stopped crying and stared up at her inquisitively. Florence spoke quietly. All right, sweetie, let's give you a feed. Then we'll go downstairs and Daddy will have made breakfast. Florence opened her dressing gown and paused. The word Daddy always made her feel slightly uneasy, even now, although she was determined that Adam would always be Elsie's father. She had no intention of mentioning the man who treated her so badly after a one-night stand. As far as she was concerned, Adam was Elsie's father, not Darrell Featherstone. The past didn't matter. She would never look backwards. That was all there was to it, despite the fact that Elsie looked nothing like Adam. She closed her eyes and enjoyed the sensation of Elsie feeding, a special bond. Her thoughts moved to Adam, who she could hear downstairs at the front door, talking to the postie, bumping around in the kitchen. Florence wondered if she and Adam would have a child together. They talked about it, but it was early days. Florence arrived downstairs with Elsie on her shoulder, now fed and nappy changed. The baby reached out a hand towards Adam, who was sitting at the table eating cereal. Wearing the smart jacket he used for work most days, his eyes dark beneath a thatch of twist curls, he looked very handsome. He'd filled a bowl of cereal for her, and a mug of tea was steaming beside it. Florence knew at that moment how much she loved him. She placed Elsie in her high chair, and Adam offered her a beaker of water. Elsie pushed it into her mouth, took 2 glugs, and threw it on the floor. Adam eased himself from his seat and picked it up. It could stay on the table now. Elsie was playing with a colourful hedgehog toy. She began to chew its nose. Florence reached for a spoon. Where's Dad? In the bathroom, shaving. Apparently the galaxy's still not finished. And what are you up to in the office? Busy, busy. Adam stretched his arms over his head. Dad's set up a meeting with George Ledbury to talk about his farm. He's bringing invoices for me to take a look at. We're analysing financial data, helping his farm save money. Why? Florence looked concerned. Is everything all right? Adam didn't know. George has asked me to look at his accounts. He lifted a pile of letters from the table. These just came. A bill, another bill, some sort of circular, and one for you. He handed a pink envelope across the table. Florence looked at the envelope and froze. Adam noticed her expression change. He asked, Is everything all right? Florence turned the letter over, examining it front and back. It was from Northampton. She kept her voice light. It's fine. Who's it from? Adam leaned forward. Florence, are you okay? Yes. No, I mean, it's nothing, Adam. Just junk mail. Florence avoided his eyes. She could tell he was concerned. But at that moment her father came in and she said, Morning, Dad, relieved to change the subject. Dangerous Dave plonked himself down. "I could murder a cup of tea." Florence glanced at his chin. A ragged cut was glued together with a blob of tissue paper. He had sliced his skin shaving. She stood up quickly, shoving the pink envelope into the pocket of her dressing gown. She saw Adam's eyes follow her movements and recognized the anxious expression in his eyes. She smiled to cover her awkwardness. "I'll make toast, shall I?" "A fried egg would be nice, Princess. And have we got any ketchup?" "I'm on it, Dad." Florence stood in the kitchen trying to catch her breath. She could hear her father chattering with Elsie, making silly noises, singing "The Wheels on the Bus." Adam raised his voice. "Can I give you a hand?" "No, I'm fine," Florence said quickly, reaching for a sliced loaf, pushing bread into the toaster. She tugged the envelope from her pocket. Her heart had started to thump hard. "Miss Florence Dawson, 17 Newlands, Middleton Ferris, Oxfordshire." Florence stared at the envelope again. She recognized the handwriting. She couldn't bring herself to open it. It would only be bad news. She shoved it back in her pocket and reached for a pan to fry her father's egg. She'd leave the letter where it was, or she'd put it in the bin and forget about it forever. Chapter 3. Dickie Edwards Jr. was drying glasses in the Sun Inn as Josie waltzed through the door. The pub was quiet. Gerald Harris, called Bomber by everyone in the village, from the immaculately tidy bungalow down the road, was treating his new squeeze, Margaret Fenimore, to lunch. Margaret was sipping gin, her voice carrying through the bar. "Young men should be made to go. I can't see why people don't agree with conscription anyway. After all, we all have to pay our taxes. It's just the same thing, paying what's owed." "Exactly. It would teach youngsters discipline and respect," Gerald said, holding her hand. Josie smiled as she approached the bar. It was a good thing Minnie wasn't here. She'd have picked an argument with Margaret, explaining people's right to exercise free will. Josie glanced around. Kenny Hooper and Jimmy Baker were hunched over pints in the corner, gossiping. She remembered them from primary school. They'd both been in Miss Hamilton's class too. Josie was sure that as soon as Cecily walked in, Jimmy and Kenny would offer to buy her a drink. As Josie leaned on the bar, Dickie Jr. gave her his best smile. "What'll you have, Josie?" "Cecily and I are having lunch, so I'll treat myself to a glass of wine. She'll be here any moment." "Do you want to sit by the window?" Dickie said kindly. "I'll bring your drinks across. Chenin Blanc?" "Yes, please," Josie said. "I heard you went on a big cruise last year." Dickie leaned forward. "I've often thought about cruising." "Oh, it was wonderful." Josie couldn't help the sigh that escaped her lips. It had been her 50th wedding anniversary cruise to the Caribbean, the trip that she and Harry had always dreamed of. She'd gone alone to remember him. It was almost 3 years now since he'd passed. Dickie looked sad for a moment. "Of course, I've got this place to run and Dad can't help out now." "How is Dickie Senior?" Josie asked anxiously. "Not good." Dickie Jr. spoke quietly. "The diagnosis at Christmas bowled us all over. He's gone downhill these past few weeks. The doctor says he hasn't got long." Josie pressed Dickie's hand. "I'm sorry. I've known your dad all his life." "You were all in Miss Hamilton's class," Dad said. Dickie gave a brave laugh. "Dad was a bit of a tearaway when he was a kid." "He was," Josie said kindly. She remembered as clearly as yesterday the time Minnie knocked his front tooth out in the wreck when he attempted to bully Tina, and another time Dickie Edwards had called Lynn Skinny Linny when she slipped in the mud. He joked to his friends she'd pooed her pants. Josie had told him to shut his cake hole, and Minnie had threatened him. But the memory made Josie sad. Dickie's time was running out now. It was running out for all of them, Josie thought. Mum has COPD. She can't help. The pub keeps me in touch with people. Dickie Jr.'s words dragged Josie from her thoughts. I was just thinking I haven't seen Fergal Toomey for a while. He's been visiting relatives in Ireland. He was going to Appleby Horse Fair, Josie said. She liked Fergal. They were good friends, although village gossips said that there was much more going on between them. It made Josie feel uncomfortable and disloyal to Harry. She glanced over her shoulder as the door opened. A woman in a peach suit and crimson lipstick was making her way steadily through the pub, leaning on a stick. Josie called, "Cecily, what will you have to drink?" "Wine, of course," Cecily beamed, as Dickie Jr. rushed from the bar to guide her to the table by the window and settle her comfortably with cushions. She patted his hand. "That's so sweet of you." Dickie blushed. "Oh, it's no problem." Josie hid a smile. Cecily always had the ability to make men feel bashful around her. Even now, Dickie was fawning over her, recommending the camembert and cherry tomato tart. Kenny Hooper and Jimmy Baker lifted their pint glasses in greeting. Jimmy shouted, "All right, miss. I'll buy you a wine." "Thank you, dear," Cecily said warmly. "Chenin blanc." Jimmy looked confused. He waved a finger towards Dickie Jr. "Make sure Miss Hamilton has some wine, will you, mate?" "And Josie," Kenny added. Josie smiled thanks and turned her attention towards Cecily. "So, what's new?" She wouldn't talk about Dickie Sr.'s illness yet. Cecily would be upset. "What have you been up to?" "I've been on Facebook." Cecily flourished her phone. "Jack sent me some footage of him playing with granddaughter. I was thinking I might try to video myself playing something on the guitar and send it to him." "Isn't that difficult?" Josie asked. "Videoing yourself?" Cecily winked. "I'm getting quite adept on my iPhone." "What will you play?" "I've been practicing Sultans of Swing. It's harder than you'd think, but it suits my voice. I can't croon like I used to." "I remember you playing Chuck Berry when we were kids." Josie smiled fondly. "You had a lovely voice." "Talking of Chuck Berry," Cecily recalled the song Nadine. "How are George and his pet Hampshire pig?" "I saw Penny in the co-op. She says things are tough on the farm. George's turnover isn't what it was. Annual overheads have shot up." "Poor George," Cecily said. "The Ledburys are a large family, too. A lot of mouths to feed." "George Jr. manages everything. And the grandchildren are doing their best. Bobby's living in one of the cottages with Hayley and her 2 children, doing most of the physical work. And Natalie's taken over some of the paperwork." Cecily agreed. George should be retiring, leaving the work to his son and the rest of the family. "Penny didn't seem to want to rush home." Josie lowered her voice. She was asking about the father of Florence's baby again. She made some comment about it not being Adam's, and you could see she was desperate to know, but I told her it wasn't our business. Cecily frowned crossly. It's Florence's life, and she and Adam are doing so well, bringing up the little one. Adam's always going to be a better father than that appalling waste of space, whose name will never pass my lips. Josie agreed. Cecily's feistiness always impressed her. You and I and Lynn and Minnie know who he is, and Adam, of course, and I'm sure the father himself must have some idea. But Florence has sworn us to secrecy. Elsie comes first. Doesn't Dangerous Dave know? Cecily asked. No, he doesn't, and it's best left like that. Josie pressed her lips together. Do you remember the barbecue at my house? Dave picked a fight with the Toomey boys when he thought one of them was the father. Devlin and Finn were horrified. When are they all back? Soon. There's no one on the barge at the moment. Josie exhaled. It feels strange when I come out of the graveyard and glance over to the charwell, and there's no Fergal, no boys, no smell of coffee or stew drifting on the air. Talking of stew, I'm hungry, Cecily said, just as Dickie arrived with plates of camembert and tomato tart, a salad, and 2 glasses of wine. Here you are, ladies. Enjoy. The chenin blanc is courtesy of Jimmy and Kenny. Cecily glanced up and saw 2 faces grinning at her from a far table, 2 pints lifted in greeting. Cecily raised her glass graciously. Thank you, Kenny. Jimmy? Miss, came the chorus from the 2 men. Cecily's phone pinged, and she glanced at it. It's just Facebook, she said, as she sipped white wine. I'll look at it later. Much later, Cecily and Josie stepped out from the bar into bright sunshine. Cecily clambered onto her purple mobility.